Welcome to the National Pulse back in Washington, D.C. I'm Raheem Kassam, Editor-in-Chief of thenationalpulse.com. The left is in panic mode again, as it will be constantly between now and January the 20th, 2021. They've unloaded a bunch of their October scare tactics early. Oh, and have you noticed they've also called off their attack dogs in the streets somewhat too? Well, we're about to see a resurgence of the Democrat-led violence in cities across the United States as early as the end of this week. But the Democrats right now are lost at sea as far as it comes to messaging, policy, and events. And it often comes down to events, doesn't it? The major expected or unexpected things which interrupt a perfectly planned political campaign. Events like an email server hack or a candidate passing out in the sun and being bundled into the back of a minivan. Yeah, sometimes events can take hold of history and definitely take hold of emotion. The emotions of the political left and their globalist bedfellows are particularly on edge right now, and for all of us to see. Niels Gilman, the head of the Transition Integrity Project, recently launched into what can only be described as a violent, threatening tirade against a former member of the Trump administration. Why? Because Michael Anton, former NSA communications strategist, had the audacity to write an article and come on this show to talk about what he called the coming coup. Anton said in his article, which you can read on the American Mind website, he said, remember the Democrats used the war game word street fight. That's the phrase they used in the Transition Integrity Project's own report. In other words, a repeat of this summer, only much, much bigger. Crank the propaganda to eardrum-shattering decibels and fill the streets of every major city with protesters. Shut down the country and only allow one message to be heard: Trump must go. i.e., what's come to be known as a color revolution. The exact same playbook the American deep state runs in other countries whose leadership they don't like, and is currently running in Belarus. Oust a leader, even an elected one, through agitation and call it democracy. The events of the last few months may be interpreted as an attempted color revolution that failed to gain enough steam, writes Anton, or as a trial run for the fall. Is the Trump administration prepared? End quote. I want to make sure we get this up on the screen here. Niels Gilman responded with this tweet on your screens now about executing Michael Anton. Gilman said, Michael Anton is the Robert Brasillach of our times and deserves the same fate. Well, Robert Brasillach was a fascist and a collaborator against the nation of France, and was put up against a wall and executed by firing squad on February the 6th, 1945. This is the same fate the Soros and CCP-backed Gilman wants for Anton: execution. Except this time it's not Anton who is the fascist, it's Gilman. A devotee of the Berggruen Institute, Gilman finds himself in the company of Xi Jinping on the Berggruen Institute website. Who else is there? Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter; Francis Fukuyama, the man who told us neoliberalism was the be-all and end-all of Western civilization; Pierre Omidyar, a Democrat benefactor intrinsically linked with the Lincoln Project and the Never Trump movement; Eric Schmidt, remember that name; former Google CEO who begged to be on Hillary Clinton's campaign, Fareed Zakaria, CNN anchor, and a whole lot more. Yeah, but Gruen's 21st Century Council, that's what they call it, is a veritable who's who of who sold out the Western world to the most heinous, brutal, and disgusting dictatorship of our times and others. And this is who wants to put Michael Anton up against a wall. Well, they'll have a hard time of it if we have anything to say about it, and we do. And my next guest, Michael Anton's colleague and friend, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute, has something to say about it too. Stick around for that and more. We'll jump to a quick break now. When we come back, Ryan Williams, and we'll be talking to another group as well, the Election Integrity Project, not the Transition Integrity Project. I want to go to a quick break now. This is the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. Well, I don't know about you guys at home, but I like to feel like I don't know everything from time to time, even though it may not be true. Now, that's why I subscribe to the Claremont Review of Books. It is the smart people's magazine quarterly, and I suggest all of you guys do too. Our next guest is the publisher of the Claremont Review of Books, really one of the smartest publications out there, makes me feel completely ignorant about everything, and just informs so well. And a lot of the things you hear on this show, on the War Room show, come directly as a result of reading the very smart thinkers they put in the Claremont Review of Books. The president of the Claremont Institute, Ryan Williams, joins us here on the National Pulse. Ryan, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Raheem. Good to join you.
In a way, I'm actually upset that you have to join me for this, because what's happened to one of our fellow Claremontsters over the last couple of days is really quite extraordinary. I really didn't think we were quite at this point yet. Threats from street activists, yeah, okay, we're all used to that over the course of the years when I've done reporting out in the field. You get them, it happens. I've been hit in the face with a ladder by a Greenpeace activist, no less. I tried to remind him that the active part of it was peace, but he wasn't particularly interested in that. But from very high up people in very supposedly august institutions like the Berggruen Institute, I never thought we were quite there yet. Ryan, this tweet from Nils Gilman is utterly repugnant, and I noticed that you're not exactly a bombast. You're not exactly somebody who relishes going out there and screaming. You're kind of the more subtle, nuanced guy out there. But you sent a pretty robust letter to the Berggruen Institute, did you not?
I did, and your avid listeners and viewers, I'm sure, have seen the tweet. Nils Gilman, a vice president at the Berggruen Institute, basically said that Mike Anton deserves the fate that Robert Brasilic met. And of course, Brasilic was a pro-fascist writer in Vichy, France, and was basically killed for intellectual crimes by firing squad. Charles de Gaulle wanted to make an example of him. But in our current by our current lights, he basically was killed for hate speech. And so it was clear to us that Nils Gilman, whose tweet is still up, by the way, he has not taken it down, he hasn't apologized. I wanted to raise the temperature a bit, and so I sent a letter to the Berggruen Institute, to the founder, Nicholas Berggruen, and the Nils's boss, who helps him edit one of their publications, and said, ask them, is the Berggruen Institute fine with this tweet? Do they condone the effective call for the assassination of their political enemies, namely Michael Anton? And I wanted to illustrate that we took that very seriously at the Claremont Institute. We take threats against our staff and senior fellows very seriously, so I thought we couldn't really let it stand, and I intend to pursue it further.
What does pursuing it further look like for you guys? I mean, why would Nils Gilman have to remove this tweet? After all, he organizes the Berggruen Institute's 21st Century Council with members of the Chinese Communist Party, but critically, with Jack Dorsey sitting on that very same council, the founder of Twitter. He's not going to make him take one of his fellow board members' tweets down, is he?
I really doubt it. Eric Schmidt's on their board of directors. Ernesto Zedillo, the former Mexican president, also on their board of directors. I don't expect much action from Berggruen, sadly, but if I can make Nils's life a little uncomfortable, I will, because frankly, we just can't put up with this sort of thing on the right. We've been sort of, rolling our eyes at it for too long. And in this day and age, with our politics and the political conversation where it is right now, it's the height of irresponsibility, to say the least, to go about throwing this kind of rhetoric around on Twitter. One thing I'm going to do today is call the Los Angeles field office of the FBI. Some lunatic could come to our office because they read this tweet, because they think Anton's some sort of fascist and decide they want to do something about it. It's just really irresponsible and frankly, dangerous.
I want to remind people as well, Ryan, that this comes just, 10 days, 2 weeks after somebody who was ostensibly a Trump supporter was executed in the street. I mean, we're not talking about theoretical violence anymore. We're seeing it, repeatedly seeing it, people being persecuted. And you're going to see it, I said in my monologue, I said you're going to see it more and more with the hand down of the Breonna Taylor case today and what happened there. You're going to see more and more violence and riots and looting, etc. And meanwhile, these guys, who are supposed to be the adults in the room, remember, they've been telling us, Ryan, since the Brexit vote and that whole campaign, and since the 2016 election results here, that they are the adults in the room, that they are the experts, that the world is better run when it's run by them. The Francis Fukuyamas and the Jack Dorseys and the Fareed Zakarias, all these people on the 21st Century Council with Niels Gilman. This is what adulting looks like to them. It is threatening your opponents for hate speech, threatening them with the firing squad for what they class as hate speech. And Ryan, I want to get into this, how we got to this position in the first place, because it's not like Michael Anton wrote anything that was untrue. The Coming Coup was a very short essay, in fact, and picked up on a lot of the reporting that had been done on the Revolver.news and by Darren Beattie and by Natalie Winters and here at the National Pulse. Was there anything in this article that you look back at and think, oh, maybe we shouldn't have let him go to print on that?
Not in the least. I mean, the claim Niels was linking to a piece from the Forward, which is scurrilous and stupid, but basically calling out Anton for saying that the Transition Integrity Project was conducted on George Soros's dime. As you've reported, this is verboten. You can't say this sort of thing now. It's anti-Semitic to question George Soros or what he meddles with. But it's clear for anyone reading this kind of thing that he's, of course, very much linked to the Transition Integrity Project. He's mucking about in American politics. Newt Gingrich recently wrote a piece for us about his episode of getting cut off on Fox News because he raised the problem of George Soros messing around in American politics. So, no, I mean, there's nothing factually incorrect in that piece. It's just been extraordinary to watch. It's almost a piece every day or every other day now from the mainstream media repeating over and over and over again, Trump may not leave office, he may not concede, he may try to steal the election, when from where you and I sit, basically the ground is being prepared for the opposite to happen, which is Biden not conceding, Biden dragging this out, and basically the left and Democratic apparatus trying to win this election or steal it by hook or crook.
Let me ask you a question. We've got 2 minutes here left in this segment. Our guest is president of the Claremont Institute, Ryan Williams. Ryan, I get asked this question a lot. I want to see what your take on this is as well. When things like this happen, do you ever sort of think to yourself, well, actually, what precautions am I taking about my life? Because there are crazies out there, and the crazies are being spurred on by people like Niels Gilman. Do you fear for your life? Do you fear for Michael Anton's life as a result of this stuff?
Well, I know Michael's very concerned. He lives in the greater D.C. area, and he's quite worried about the coming weeks leading up to the election. I think for good reason. I mean, anyone who's been following the national news ought to be somewhat concerned. I don't have any acute fear for my own life. Niels Gilman is certainly not helping. We're out here on the edge of L.A. County, and luckily we don't really have any trouble with Antifa or anything. But I do worry about my staff. We have decent security measures here at the office, but it's really troubling when, as you said, the quote unquote adults in the room are descending to this kind of really neo-fascistic political rhetoric. That's what we should call it.
Ryan, when we come back, I want to ask you if we've seen any condemnation or even coverage of this threat, of this incitement to violence against Michael Anton from anybody in the mainstream media. I'm very happy to hear if they have and if it's true, but I've yet to see it. I haven't seen it anywhere on CNN or anything like that, and if it was the other way around, it would absolutely be wall-to-wall coverage. If a Trump supporter, somebody involved in an institution, if Ryan Williams sent a tweet like that to somebody in the Obama administration, you could bet it would make the front page of the national newspapers. This is the National Pulse. We'll be right back after this short break. Stick around. Well, the left's threats of violence, and indeed their violent activities, are scarcely mentioned by many in the mainstream media. You get a few clips here or there, but remember, with fires raging in the back of their shots, CNN will continue to call them peaceful protests. I guess Niels Gilman sent Michael Anton a peaceful tweet. My guest is the president of the Claremont Institute, a good friend of mine, although he won't like me to tell you that. Ryan Williams joins us down the line from California. Ryan, thank you for joining us. I wanted to ask you, on the back of all of this, Michael Anton clearly being threatened by a member of the Berggruen Institute, linked directly as one of the founding organizations of the Transition Integrity Project, who we first outed here on this show 6 weeks ago. I'm incredibly happy with the work we've done on that since, and the work that you guys have done at the American Mind, at the Claremont Institute, the Claremont Review of Books, what Michael Anton's been doing, what other outlets have been doing. American Greatness has had some articles on this as well. So we're really glad that we finally got these people in our proverbial sights. And they seem to be panicking as a result. But my question to you is anybody in the mainstream media, anybody in the establishment media covering any of this? Because for me, this is about as bad as it gets unless Niels Gilman personally tried to execute Michael Anton.
Yeah, I haven't seen any real evidence that the mainstream media has said much of anything about this. Brit Hume was the closest, and he wondered if we were going to get a response to that letter, and he did that on Twitter. But other than that, there's been pretty much silence on the whole thing.
I'm stunned by that. Honestly, I am stunned by it. I thought somewhere some level of decency existed within these people, but I guess not. Ryan, I want to move on with you because there is other news out there, and I do want to make sure that we cover it. You guys have been working incredibly hard fighting back against the 1619 project, this neo-Marxist project that seeks to rewrite American history. The Claremont Institute is, of course, one of the greatest institutions in this country that guards and tells American history correctly. And the president seems to be taking this as seriously as you guys, which I must imagine just feels and sounds great to you, between the 1776 Commission and what we heard about last night, the ban on federal government funds going to corporates who teach Marxist critical theory. Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a wonderful and heartening development. And frankly, I think there are few Republican presidents, if any, of recent memory, or even candidates of recent memory, other than Donald Trump, who would have turned the tables on this sort of thing so quickly. I mean, diversity and inclusion and critical race theory is all the rage in our federal system, across our state governments, in our institutions. So to question it is to be a pariah. So the fact that Trump is leading on this is really heartening, because if we teach this sort of thing in our schools and to our federal employees and spread it across our corporate boardrooms, it can only divide and demoralize Americans, make them hate their country, and really divide them along tribal lines that can only lead to something like an ever escalating temperature in our, for now, what we hope for now, it remains a cold civil war and not a warm or a hot one. If we spew this kind of stuff, it's a recipe for disaster.
Let me ask you this question, Ryan. I mean, the developments are obviously very welcome, but we're seeing now the collusion between big corporates, big media, and the Marxist movements, and one of them being Black Lives Matter. Now, we recently saw this initiative by Black Lives Matter to kind of purge their website, to memory hold things that were not convenient on their website. They've deleted the fact that they regard themselves as anti-traditional family, right? Anti-nuclear family. Do you think that's because of the backlash from real America against all of these groups?
I think it out with the violence and the riots. I think the internal polling must be pretty bad on the Democratic side. And look, Black Lives Matter is a kind of neo-Marxist movement, but it's politically savvy enough to know that if it's with its declining popularity, which is showing in the polls over the last 2 months, they need to tone it down. They need to shift tactics, and that's what they seem to be doing. Luckily, there are great reporters and organizations like you at National Pulse who will hold them to it and continue to point out to, as you said, normal America, that this group really is radical. It's not about justice. It's really about the transformation of America and the overthrow of the American way of life and the American Constitution.
Just finally, before I let you go, I want to get the audience all up to speed with what's going on with the Claremont Institute. We've got about 2.5 minutes. Ryan, just briefly, what is the Claremont Institute and what is this latest initiative that you're undertaking here in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, thanks, Raheem. We're we've always had one foot in the political world, one foot in the academic world. We teach, we write, we litigate, and we're expanding our D.C. presence. Our mission has always been to restore and apply founding principles, and we think the principles of 76 are what ought to guide us now. And frankly, with the regime threats that we see domestically, especially in identity politics, groups like Black Lives Matter, the 1619 Project, that all needs direct frontal assault. And so our new Center for the American Way of Life, which will launch next month under Arthur Millick's executive directorship, will do just that. It will make the arguments about why the anti-American tenets of the modern left must be countered, whether it's legislatively or intellectually, and how we ought to go about doing that, and really trying to help Republicans and the conservative movement think more as counter-revolutionaries after 100 years of liberalism, and less about the staid, conservative Inc. institutions of maybe the 70s or 80s. It's a different time. We need to take a different tack, and we look forward to leading that effort.
I talk about it all the time here, Ryan, on the show, and we'd love to have you back to unpack some of that as well in the future. Just in the last couple of seconds we have, can you let our audience know where they can go to sign up, find out more, to subscribe to the Claremont Review of Books?
Sure. Yeah, Claremont.org is our institutional site. ClaremontReviewofBooks.com is where you can subscribe to the magazine and check out our digital publication, which is growing leaps and bounds, AmericanMind.org.
Ryan Williams, thank you once again for joining us here on the National Pulse. Ladies and gentlemen, I've genuinely cancelled dates in my time because my Claremont Review of Books arrived that day and I wanted to read it so much. And I'm now afraid that the people that I did that to are going to see this and find out. In the next segment, I want to talk to you about this incredible reporting that's been coming out of Just the News, our new partner, news gathering partner here on Real America's Voice. And I'm just seeing breaking: John Solomon, the head of Just the News, his account on Twitter is being censored. We'll get to it in just a second. You know, if you're watching this on Pluto or Roku, you miss one little additional part of the show that we sometimes get on YouTube, on the YouTube live stream, which is our hot mics in the break. Don't worry, we're not saying anything naughty. We're just trying to plan out. I've got John Solomon literally sitting two offices behind me, behind this wall, trying to grab him to get him on the show, but he's actually recording himself right now as well. John Solomon, the head of Just the News, being, it looks like, temporarily restricted on Twitter. This is live. We're breaking this all live right now. Now listen, I mean, John has 726,000 followers, and recently Just the News, which is the new news gathering partner of Real America's Voice, i.e. this network, They just reported over the last couple of days, exclusive upon exclusive, about the Senate report that slams the Bidens for conflicts of interest and flags possible criminal activity. I want you all to make sure that you go to justthenews.com and check out the reporting on there. And they also include in the dig in section, which is a tab on Just the News, where you can see what source materials their reporters are using, i.e. not anonymous sources. I want you to go there, share all of these stories before the entire site gets pulled down. This isn't a test. This isn't a setup. This is happening in real time in front of our eyes. They dropped this report about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and suddenly John Solomon loses access to his 726,000 Twitter account, which has really been driving this news over the last couple of days. I want to turn now to Natalie Winters, who's in studio with me here. Natalie, there was a lot in this report, and I think you had some criticisms about the way that it was presented, and I want to hear them, and I think the audience needs to hear them as well. It's kind of his typical Republican way of presenting some really shocking information, Natalie.
Well, exactly. So to contextualize this report, we've seen unprecedented attacks against the Trump family, all the way down to 13-year-old Barron Trump. We've also seen a host of mainstream media talking heads saying that President Trump is corrupt and he's been cozying up to dictators and obviously the now debunked Russia collusion hoax. But it seems that Hunter Biden is guilty of basically all those charges. Specifically, as you said, this report coming out of the Senate on Hunter Biden's business dealings, ranging from China to Kazakhstan to Russia to the Ukraine. He's made billions of dollars, both him as an individual and firms that he's linked to, by inking these lucrative deals, sitting on boards, consulting for companies in which he has no experience in dealing with, all at the expense of taxpayer dollars.
So what are we seeing here? I mean, what does this report really contain? There's a bunch of things on Zero Hedge that I'm seeing about human trafficking being mentioned in this report. Obviously, the Just the News article just has so much information in it. So what should we be looking for? What should people out there be looking for?
Exactly. So it's 87 pages, which is a lot of information. And as you said, I did have some qualms with
Why would they dump that all out like that?
Exactly.
Why wouldn't they trickle?
Well, I think there is so much information. And again, the narratives that are presented in this document, not that they're not new narratives, we see new evidence corroborating these claims, but they are narratives that we've heard before, whether it's been throughout the impeachment inquiry or even some of the reporting we've done over at the National Pulse and similarly with Just the News.
I mean, we've never heard it from such a reputable source before. The world has heard about it from the lips of Raheem Kassam and Jack Maxey on war and impeachment, but this is a Senate report we're talking about.
Exactly. It's a total vindication of those that the media class would call conspiracy theorists and aggressive China hawks and critics of the Biden campaign. In contrast, we saw FOIA requests with intense emails and comprehensive reporting on all the documents that corroborate what we've been talking about, whether it's Burisma, how he sat on the board of that company, or most notoriously, we've seen it circulating on Twitter quite frequently that for $3.5 million, he was hired by the wife of a Russian mayor of Moscow to provide consultancy.
How much? I mean, what else do we need for the media to do its damn job and firstly find Hunter Biden?
Exactly.
Ask him questions. And is anybody going to ask Joe Biden any questions? I think there's this clip floating around Twitter at the moment that Hunter Biden was asked this a while back at an SEIU meeting. And he totally said, I'm not going to answer those questions. He just said, I'm not going to answer those questions. The president would never get away with saying, oh, I'm not going to answer any questions about any of his family members being implicated in anything like this. So what's it going to take? I mean, this is a guy who's had a drug problem, who's effectively been booted out of the military, who has traveled to China how many times on the taxpayer dime?
6 times.
6 times, hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's got the baby mama and the stripper and the everything.
And the media has its head in the sand. I think this report is a complete indictment on the mainstream media outlets. They've refused to investigate and really look into this. Obviously, we've covered Hunter Biden's business dealings, took the Senate to issue FOIA requests. But I think the other interesting thing that you see going on here is that there really are 2 courts in which these findings will be adjudicated in. One is potentially criminal courts, right? Obviously, the business dealings we've seen uncovered involve prostitution and potentially human trafficking, but also the court of public public opinion. And I think the most imminent kind of trial date in that sense will be the 2020 election. I think this is going to weigh heavily on the Biden campaign. It's certainly a dark day for the Biden team because this represents everything that Americans hate. Family members of establishment politicians getting wealthy to the tune of billions of dollars off the backs of American taxpayers.
Do you think the signal is cutting through, however, with the public? Do you think the public are starting to realize that actually, there's a lot here that CNN ain't telling us, and we're going to watch Real America's Voice instead?
Well, I think having the weight of the Senate behind this report definitely raises the stakes in terms of the fact that these allegations are not just allegations. There's evidence that corroborates these findings. But in terms of a criminal proceeding or CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post really doing their due diligence on these matters, I'm highly skeptical that any of that will come to fruition.
All right, well, we'll see, and we'll keep pushing on it and hoping that the truth really finds its way out there. I mean, Hunter Biden has just lived his playboy lifestyle at the expense of taxpayers and the expense of people in his life, quite frankly, for so very long. And this is somebody who we're supposed to just ignore. He's the son of the guy who wants to be president, the guy who wanted to send Hunter Biden abroad, take him abroad with him, take him to China, take him to all these places, enrich him. Get the prosecutor in the Ukraine fired to help out Hunter Biden. Remember all of that? We'll be hearing more about it, obviously, over the course of the next couple of weeks as we get closer and closer to this election. Now, when we come back, we'll be speaking to members of the Election Integrity Project. Very different from the Transition Integrity Project. The first being the good guys, the second being the bad guys that want to put us up against the wall and shoot us, apparently. We'll be back after this break. Would you look at that? So in the last segment, I reported that John Solomon's account was temporarily restricted. I took a screen grab of it because these things can pop up and go away and then people don't believe you, say you're making it up. So I took a screen grab, posted it, and sure enough, after 500 retweets in a matter of, I think, 14 minutes, John Solomon's account is back up. So we'll be following up with Twitter to see why they've been taking down journalists' accounts right this close to an election. And these are the sorts of things that we're seeing from the psychopaths of Silicon Valley. My next guest is going to explain to us some more psychotic things that are taking place around this country as it relates to the integrity of elections. Not transitions, elections. Ellen Swenson is the chief analyst for the Election Integrity Project in California and in Nevada. Ellen, welcome to the National Pulse. Ellen, there's a lot of people out there who have mistaken the Transition Integrity Project and the Election Integrity Project. Now, the Transition Integrity Project is the globalist CCP Soros organization, which is basically saying, hey, Biden's going to win and we're going to make sure that he's seen as the victor, and that's why we're calling it the Transition Integrity Project. We believe that there is already a transition. You guys are actually more concerned with how democracy works and with how the Republic operates, and that is the Election Integrity Project. Can be confusing, but I want to make that very clear. So what do you guys actually do, and how does it differ from the bad guys?
Okay, so we have been working for 10 years in California as citizen volunteers. We're all volunteers and we're all retired professionals to oversee the California elections and try to get the election officials to actually follow the laws so that the voters can have confidence in the vote and then participate more. The Transition Integrity Project appears to be a group that wants to do the opposite. They want to exploit any chaos that might be in the election and then turn it to their own means. And they want to take it. It appears that they want to take the election out of the hands of the people and put it into the courts.
And they clearly want to threaten with firing squads the people that stand up to them, like Michael Anton. Ellen, you've been doing this then for a pretty long time. Can you walk us through some of the trends that you see when you look at trying to maintain integrity around elections around the United States of America? Which direction are we heading in? And what do you see as the chief analyst of the Election Integrity Project? What do you see happening with all these mail-in ballots that are being sent unsolicited everywhere?
Well, the trends we've been seeing, it's interesting because they tend to start in California and then they sweep across the rest of the nation. We're kind of a testing ground for these progressive new election laws. And it seems that the focus is more on access to the ballot than it is on the integrity. We're all for access, but that has to come with some kind of boundaries and some guardrails. Otherwise, people will not trust in the results of the elections. So what we're seeing as a trend, for example, is when we observed in the polls, the only few laws that we have that protect voters from impersonation and other fraud, instead of fixing what we point out when they're not following those laws, they actually just change the laws and make it and just remove the law. So, for example, we used to have a law where you walked into the polling place and you had to state your name and address out loud, and that was repeated out loud. And that would allow others in the room to challenge you if you weren't that person. Well, when nobody was following that law, we complained, and they just removed that law. So now you can walk in, there's no ID, you can just hand an index card or your sample ballot to the clerk, and you get a ballot and you vote and you go on your way. But there's no way that we know if that person is really the person. There's nothing protecting the voters.
You know, we had a member of the European Parliament in here in studio on the show a couple of weeks ago, Ellen, Jerome Riviere, and I was telling him that there is an ID mechanism to vote in the U.S. elections. He couldn't believe it. He absolutely couldn't believe it. And there are so many European nations that have dabbled with mail-in ballots that have actually turned their back on it and said, okay, we'll keep mail-in ballots for people who absolutely need them. They absolutely cannot make their way to the polls. But no civilized Western nation, I don't think, would just mass send unsolicited millions upon millions, tens of millions of ballots out. I mean, this is a recipe for not disaster, but total catastrophe, is it not? It
is, and I believe it's been set up. They've been pushing for vote by mail for years here in California. The DMV, when you go to renew your license, they re-register you, and then, for example, I was changed to vote by mail without my consent. But the other thing that's been happening here is as if they're creating the chaos and then they're going to exploit it. For example, we do not have standard signature matching guidelines in the state of California. In fact, Stanford Law School just recently published an article in May stating just that. And you would think if we wanted to have the integrity in this upcoming all-mail election where signatures are even more important than ever, that the Secretary of State would get together with the counties, come up with a standard, we could all agree on the standard, the candidates and the parties and so on, and the groups like ours, and then when you go and apply the standards in the election, then there's less room for dispute. But of course, that has not happened. So they've created the problem, and now they're going to exploit it to their own ends.
A lot of what we're talking about appears in this book here, Ballot Battles, by Ed Foley. I don't know if you've managed to get your hands on a copy of this yet, Ellen, but there are stories upon stories in this book that they lay out to say, American democracy doesn't really work, and we need to have an electoral commission. I mean, I called that a couple of weeks ago that was their next move, and sure enough, Dan Coates comes out just a couple of days later with an op-ed in the New York Times. He says Raheem was right. Well, no, he didn't say Raheem was right, but he said, we need an electoral commission. Is that something that you've looked into? Tell us about how an electoral commission would work, or if it would work at all here in the U.S., because it doesn't work anywhere else.
Yeah, it concerns me. First of all, we don't want one federal oversight because each state runs their own elections, and each county within our state, for example, runs their own elections. That's important to have that diversification across the board. So we would be against having a commission, and also who is going to be on the commission? It'll be politicized. Right. And so we'd rather have the states have the laws and follow the laws, like we have always done.
Ellen, can you hold over the break? I've got one or two more questions for you. We're going to go to a quick break now, but Ellen Swenson is our guest from the Election Integrity Project. Those are the good guys out in California and Nevada and beyond who are looking at trying to make sure the voting is secure in the United States, very different from the Transition Integrity Project, who, when they're not urging mass mail-in ballots and street fights, are calling for people to put up against the wall and shot in a firing squad. But you won't hear about that from Fareed Zakaria. Why? Because Fareed Zakaria from CNN is on the board of the 21st Century Council of the Berggruen Institute, and the Berggruen Institute founded the Transition Integrity Project along with George Soros. We'll be right back. Whenever I think of where we want to warn people from, I remember the United Kingdom, where I was born and raised and cut my teeth in a lot of elections, and a lot of corrupt elections, in East London, for instance. And I remember how the Electoral Commission was feckless, tried to do nothing to stop this mass mail-in ballot fraud and voter intimidation that was taking place at the ballot boxes, because the proposed mayoral candidate for a neighbourhood called Tower Hamlets was a Muslim by the name of Lutfur Rahman. It would have been too politically incorrect for them to assail Lutfur Rahman. Well, finally, the establishment got enough in the ear from the likes of me and got their act together and prosecuted Lutfur Rahman, and sure enough was found guilty of voter intimidation and defrauding the election, was banned from office for a long time, in fact. But there's another direction which you can look at for all of these things, and it's not east but west, and it's to California. Ellen Swenson is our guest from the Election Integrity Project, very different from the Transition Integrity Project. Ellen, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on in California? I'm fascinated by it. Why don't you take us away?
Okay, so one of our jobs at Election Integrity Project California is to acquire the voter list from the state, and it's over 20 million registered voters. And we have proprietary queries that we run to look for anomalies in the data, and then we report those back to the election officials with the hope that they will correct or investigate and then correct what they find to be wrong or an anomaly. So recently we've reported to them 458,000 registered voters who have not voted or updated their registrations in 12 or more years. That's since the 2008 election or prior. And yet they remain inexplicably on active status. Well, the new law in California is that every active status registrant is going to be mailed a ballot. So we have people who we believe are probably moved away or died because they haven't participated in that many years. I mean, we have 200,000 of those who haven't ever voted, and they've been registered 30, 40, 50 years, but they're still on active status. So we asked the Secretary of State to at least contact these people and find out what's going on before sending ballots. They refused. They said they don't have to do it by law. So we're worried that those people will all be mailed ballots, which right now they're going to be. And that's very easily, those stray ballots are like, think of them as currency. They have a political value, right? So they can be, if it comes to your house and it's a deceased person in your household, you can easily forge their signature if you're a bad actor. If they come and they're piled in your apartment building mailbox area because those people don't live there anymore, you can easily take those ballots and either sell them or somehow exploit those, illegally. Additionally, they are currency at the polling place. I could walk in with a ballot that's not mine and exchange it for a regular ballot, a poll ballot, and there's no signature match to worry about. So I could vote in the name of another person. So these are, we call them currency, or they're stray ballots, and we believe there will be hundreds of thousands of those going out into mailbox and who knows where. The other thing in California, there's a law, it's called, that protects people who are disabled or elderly and can't sign their ballot. They can put an X, and then they can have the witness sign next to it. Well, guess what? That law does not require that witness to put their name or their relationship to the voter. So I could easily get that pile, put X, sign, send them in, and they'll probably get counted. So we're very worried. In addition, we have ballot harvesting in California. People can go door to door, knock on doors, and pick up those stray ballots and either have the person sign them or do something illegal with those ballots and send them in or drop them off, and they could possibly be counted. So we saw that in 2018. All these ballots dropped off at the polling places that had been gathered from the local neighborhoods by harvesters, and that changed many of the races in Southern California in the congressional races in 2018. And people who had won on election night ended up losing after those harvested ballots were counted. So it's setting up, what used to be a road to fraud is now a superhighway, given that we're giving
Ellen,
mail ballots to everyone.
So all of that you walk through, but Ed Foley opens up his book, Ballot Battles, with the story of April Babarczyk, who went to a local polling place and couldn't cast her vote because she was accidentally misdirected to a different polling place. So for the fact that April Babarczyk wasn't able to vote because of an administrative error, they say throw the whole current system out and set up an electoral commission so that these bureaucrats can come together and decide that actually April Babarczyk's vote is valid. But what you're telling me is that there are so many votes that are being cast that should be invalid. Why? That seems disproportionate to me. Why are they approaching it from one side?
Yeah. Well, they're looking at the one individual who was there to complain, who had standing, right? But all the people out there who are legitimate voters, who are being canceled out by the illegal votes, they really don't have standing because it's a general public issue. So that tends to be ignored. But the fact is, when someone dead votes or someone votes twice, because we have people receiving 2 or more ballots, and they can vote twice undetected, or they vote like I was describing with stray ballots. That usually doesn't get caught anyway, and then it's diluting a
Ellen,
bunch
we're
of
right
other
at the
people.
end of the show, and I have 2 more questions for you, very important.
Okay.
Number 1, what should people do? And number 2, how can people connect with you guys and get involved and support your work?
I think people need to vote in person. Go early, look up wherever you live, your county, whatever, go vote early in person. If you have a vote by mail ballot they've mailed you, bring it with you. Because you can always, if the line's too long, you can always fill it out in line, sign it, and hand it in there rather than not vote at all. So it's important that you have that ballot if you have one in your hand. Otherwise, go early. That's what I'm doing. And the other thing is just encourage all your friends and neighbors to vote and vote early in person. The other thing is how you can reach us is Election Integrity Project California. Our website is eip-ca.com.
That's fantastic. Ellen, I hope you'll come back, and I hope we'll be hearing a lot more from you guys over the course of this. I mean, it's going to be carnage on the way to Inauguration Day, so we're going to need experts like yourself. And I think I speak for the whole audience when I say thank you for all the work that you have volunteered and been doing to defend democracy and defend the Republic. Ellen Swenson, the Election Integrity Project. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you like the work we're doing here at the National Pulse, make sure you go to the website, thenationalpulse.com/support. A lot of people in the live chat complimenting Natalie Winter's pink shirt today. Well, she can't keep herself in pink shirts unless you support our work. Go to fundrealnews.com. We're just so grateful for everybody that gets involved with the National Pulse. You get a lot from us as well in return. The live streams, we do private town halls for our members, the signed books, the caps. We're introducing a whole lot more into that. Get your friends to join, get your family members to join, get your colleagues to join. It all rests on your shoulders. This is the National Pulse. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m.